Well, good afternoon, everyone. Because we were going to do this morning. I was all set. I pressed the button, and my God, it wouldn't work. I think, Pat, you put a hex on it, did you? Were you making
Probably, yeah.
burning
What,
crosses and stuff?
what do you call? I'm a technophobe, Jude. No, if I look at something, it's certain not to work.
Well, I'm a bit that way myself. Anyway, I got the bloody thing working, and here we are, ready to spill our, what would you call it, wisdom
Words of
tureens.
wisdom, Jude.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the wisdom all over you. Okay, the first wisdom we're going to start with is this. I'm not sure what this was. The SDLP have produced this paper, is it? A booklet where
yeah.
it's talking about a united Ireland, is it preparing for the future Ireland or something of that nature?
I think they've called it, Jude, success by design. Jude,
Aye.
like I have to sort of own up to a wee bit. I was involved in a wee bit of a project now, not with SDLP, but myself and a fellow called Paul Galsing
Aye.
and another fellow called Colin McKenna. So I'm going to put my bona fides out there. This is nothing to do with me. So, or in fact, I had a very, very minor role in that. But here's
How
the
were
thing,
you?
Jude.
How did you have a minor role even in this one?
No, I wrote a couple of articles and we did a bit of research and all the rest. But Paul is a guy who's
Oh
brilliant
yeah,
with
we
figures.
had him on
Yeah,
as a guest one time.
and he's absolutely superb, and
Hmm.
he's brilliant at taking in detail. And he's got he was a financial journalist, and by the way, he had been a former. I didn't know this originally that he had been a former Labour councillor somewhere, I think Birmingham or somewhere.
Wow,
You
yeah.
know, so and his big forte was financial stuff. But anyway, Paul did a lot of research, and you know what? What I always say is basically one of the things Colin McKenna and Paul had said after Brexit that if we were serious about going for a United Ireland, that there would never be such a hames or such a mess or such whatever
Mm,
fuck up as if you want to be
mm.
colloquial about it. If people are going to vote for United Ireland, everybody should know what they're voting for, what they're voting against, and what the implications of both are.
Well, I think you can do that to a certain extent. You'll never know exactly how the thing's going to
No,
pan out,
there's
but you've got to
unponderables.
be at least go into it in a prepared state. So it's a fair enough title. Tell me this. Is there any, I haven't read it, but I read this quote from it in the newspaper. It says, this paper, this Preparing for Unity, this paper is an invitation to plan responsibly, to think boldly, and to build an economy that works for
Yeah,
everyone who calls this island home.
yeah,
That's a ringing words. Now,
yeah.
is there any, are there any examples given of
Uh,
how this,
they've done. No, I haven't read the. I've read mainly the sort of the what would you say the executive summary. I haven't read the boring detail, but they're looking at things like infrastructure, health services, education, and all the rest of it.
yeah,
And they're basically saying there's a lot of duplication and there's a lot of things couldn't make the whole island work. They also said that the north is so dependent on public services
yeah.
like your cops, your civil service, and it hasn't taken off in the same way that the south has
Mm,
because it's a sort of an economy that's dependent
mm,
on
mm.
whatever. And they said as well as that they said don't every time anybody talks about the north, it's about the subvention from Britain.
Yeah.
And they said they said there's a lot of potential, and there is Jude, a lot of potential in the north that hasn't been unlocked.
Hmm.
You know, like places like Derry, Jude. I walked down the street, and Derry has suffered. And I'm not going to go on a whinge about Derry, but Derry has suffered very badly from a lack of structure and investment.
Hmm.
But hey, you talk to the young people there. Jesus, Jude, they are bright as could be. A lot of them are brilliant musicians. A lot of very, very good writers. Look at even things like Derry Girls and Phil Coulter, Brian Friel, John Hume, you name it, all that sort of stuff. Right, Jude, there's real talent, and I'm sure that's repeated in Protestant and Unionist areas as well. But hey, for some reason, the North has slunk away back, and I think what the SDLP are sort of saying now, this is the whole thing of United Ireland is on the agenda, and Jude, no matter whether certain people in the unionist community want to bury their head in the sands, it's out there. And it's about time everybody had a good look at it. And I think what the SDLP are calling for is a government department set up to look at Irish unity, and that's a
Uh,
big thing.
well, I shouldn't comment, I suppose, on something I haven't read or seen. But from what I gather, they look at things like the friction between the CAO and the North's
Yeah,
A-level system. But my question is this. do they give an example of what would be the ideal? Or are they just saying, well, they're different? If they're talking about infrastructure, yes, there's problems with the infrastructure. Do they suggest any remedy for that? That's what we need. And I wonder to what extent this is bold words, fine words, but is a
Well,
beef
Jude,
missing?
I can't answer that too because I haven't read the report. I just read the reports of the launch of this thing. But they said, by the way, Jude, as far as I recall it, what I read, they said they were looking for a ministry of a new Ireland. In other words, they were looking for a specific, and in other words, official, getting the academics, getting the technocrats, getting the politicians, all right, and saying what are the implications of all this? Dude, they haven't done that so far.
Well,
And remember the John Fitzgerald, and I can't remember the name of the guy of the RSA, and Paul Gosling, and there's another guy who I actually went to a talk in Derry. His name escapes me at the top of my head right now. Who totally there's a lot of disagreement. The guy, he was a professor. Geez, I'm really annoyed with myself. I can't remember because I went even to a talk in Derry and listened to him, and he was very, very good. But he totally disagreed with John Fitzgerald. John Fitzgerald was a very doom and gloom about the Irish India, about the economics of it. Your man said absolute bollocks.
well, I want to see people listen. I'm getting tired. I'm sorry to introduce this sort of corrosive note, but I don't think there's any point in saying there's friction between the CAO system in the South in education and the North A-level system. We know that. We know they're different. What I want to know is what would you suggest would straddle these, or what would you use to change it? If you're talking about infrastructure, where do you see the need for infrastructure? Is it down at Narrow Water across to Carlingford, or where? I really do want to see stuff that is specific. If they say, oh, well, the government in the South should have a ministry for unity, I mean, I think that's really putting it on a long finger. It really is. It should be, if they're going to say they should have a minister for unity, it should be, and he should put together a citizens' assembly, or she, and it should look at these things and maybe even make maybe suggestions. It's
Yeah,
time
I
it's
think they're
time
being
to make with the
on.
real stuff, Pat. I'm fucking fed up with
Yeah, I'm not arguing about that point, but I think you've been unnecessarily pessimistic there. Jude, the Taoiseach could announce tomorrow morning, yeah, I'm setting up a new ministry, and I'm appointing whoever it is, Charlie McConlough, the minister down the road who lives in the border area. I'm appointing him the new minister, and
uh,
we're going to get a task force together, and by 2027, end of 2027, we'll have a preliminary green paper. We could
but
do that very quickly.
Willie, Pat, you mean it could well be that?
No, no, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Well, I'm terribly suspicious when people say we'll have an inquiry or we'll appoint a minister. I want to know what he's going to do and by when. I'm really, I think there's a terrible tendency to kick the can down the road. Everybody knows there's an inequality between the North and the South. Everybody knows that the situation is reversed in terms of prosperity in the South and lack of prosperity in the North. The thing is, what the hell are you going to do about it? And how can you? I mean, everybody says, well, there's duplication. Of course there is. How would you then solve that duplication? Would you abolish one hospital and have another one in the North or South? Start getting down to brass tacks. For
Sure, look. At one stage, I can't remember what exactly the background was. Within this, a couple of miles of each other in Derry, there was a Catholic school, a state school, and a Protestant school, all for primary purposes. I was going, Jesus, talk about duplication and costs. And then we have two police forces in the island of Ireland. The and Letterkenny, God knows how many Gardaí are there, and in Derry, there's God knows how many PSNI. And they only go up as far as the border. It's a ridiculous thing. And look, like the cancer services and so on. I think even now a lot of the coronary care stuff in the north, some of them have to be sent to Dublin. And
mm,
then, of course, there are various things now. If you watch RT, if you need a hip replacement, they're even willing to send you to Spain because they have spare capacity. So
well,
the whole thing needs looked at, Jude. And I am not an economist.
I agree with you, but it's not just a question of looking at it; it's doing something about it or suggesting, putting down concrete plans for what should happen. Incidentally, I think that you mentioned two things there. You mentioned the what did you mention? I've forgotten now. There was two of the things you mentioned. Yeah, policing was one of them. Now that's one that I would leave towards the end because that's a very
Yeah.
touchy one. And the other is
yeah,
education, schools, Catholic schools, state schools, Protestant schools, whatever.
yeah,
Those are both touchy subjects. I would
yeah,
start with infrastructure, with health, with things that everybody would be agreed would be good to find a way of working together. And I'd
uh,
leave those other two that are a wee bit sort of red hot until a later point or towards the end of the
yeah.
list anyway.
But to answer your question, as far as like I'm open to correction on all this because I'm reminded off the top of my head. But you asked earlier on as far as I remember reading, it was Claire Hanna, and she said we have brought forward serious proposals. So I presume the details are in there. I
But
only read the press release.
wait,
I read
Anne,
the thing in the Irish Times.
I hope you're
Say
right,
again.
Pat. I hope you're right. But I mean, she says we're bringing forward, what did you say? We're bringing forward
It's a serious proposals. So I
proposals.
presume they
Well,
have
why it
made
depend? But
proposals.
wouldn't it depend what those proposals were? What do they propose?
Yeah.
Do they
But you know,
propose?
hey, hold on, but look at the thing. You spent your teaching a lot of career in the north, right, Jim? There's the A level system in the north and
Yeah.
the leaving cert system in the south. Now you have to pass six subjects in this, really in the you have to definitely pass four and whatever, and it's a
No, it's
very
usually
broad
about
base.
six. Yeah. Yeah.
Usually about six subjects to get into university in
Yeah.
the south. No, and by the way, I talked to an American guy one time. And he says one of the reasons they invest in the republic. They said if you can get young people motivated enough to pass six subjects at that level, and he says it is a high level. He says it's worthwhile putting investing in putting in your cash into an area. Now the other system is maybe in the north. No, Jude, and this is personal. If I had been allowed to go do A levels in the north, without question, very little doubt I could have got three A levels. But in the south, when you spend time forced to do things like Irish language and maths, which are useless at both, spending hours on end about subjects I knew I was never going to use. So you're going to have some meshing of the two.
Well, I agree, Pat, but I must say, speaking personally, I know people say what it's good the CAO has a spread of subjects.
Yeah,
People it's not just narrow expertise in one area, but I can still remember the feeling of relief when I was able to drop Irish and maths and
yeah,
all these things that I kept failing and
yeah.
concentrate on subjects that I was
On the
interested in.
subjects you were good at, yeah,
God, it was
yeah.
wonderful. It really was. I
Oh,
really
yeah.
enjoyed it then.
Yeah.
So they need to think about that. But again, I'd say put something down in writing, get the thing in black and white. Put
Yeah.
some meat on the bones. We will. I think we've wasted enough time. There's no point in calling on the Irish government. The Irish government are the last people who want to see a united Ireland. So if you leave it to them, they'll find ways of postponing the evil day. That's my view.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Uh,
we'll have to.
uh,
I'll have to have a read of that. Where would I get that? I wonder, Pat.
Well, I only read the thing in the Irish Times today, Jude. I don't know what the
Uh,
details are, but I'm sure if you go to the Sdlp's website, you'll get it.
I must do that and see. I'm sure they have it up there. And then
Uh,
it'd be more fair to talk about what they've done or said or suggested than to be attacking them the way
uh,
I am. Anyway, what would you like to move to next? There's an article caught my iPad, I have to say. It's by
uh,
Katrina Crow, is in the Irish
yeah,
Times, I think, today. And the heading is The One Question Women and Girls Need to Ask About Sex.
uh,
And I'll bet you won't be able to say what the one question is. Did you read it?
no, I didn't read that one.
Well, the one question seems to be are they agreeable to this thing, which apparently is quite a favorite of men, which is choking women in the course of having sexual intercourse? Choking
Well,
them.
no, wait a minute. I heard about this. I haven't read it, but I know what you. Apparently, there was something done quite recently, and I caught the tail end of it. That they're saying a lot of young boys are now getting all their sexual experience and all the rest of it from porn on the internet,
Yeah.
and and some of it's quite violent and vile actually,
And
and
this
whatever.
choking
And
seems to be a big part of it. It's half
yeah,
strangling the woman as you're having
I,
sex with her.
uh, like geez, Jude, I don't know how that works out as being very attractive or whatever. But
Uh,
apparently, no, I can't remember exactly where it was that came across, but I remember reading or something quite recently. They're saying that they've actually there've been a number of hospitalizations of women, young women, and they're sort of asking what's going on here. And apparently, it's this sort of stuff. they're tracing a lot of it back to this sort of stuff, this sort of violent stuff on porn sites. That this is, to make sex more exciting and more
Ah,
whatever, whatever.
ah,
But
ah.
Jesus, did you ask yourself a big question? What's in it for any woman? That sort of thing. I
Well,
personally, if it was, I don't have females, but if any wee fella did that to my daughter, I would kick the shit out of him.
I have had my share of, in the course of my many decades on this earth, I've had my share of fantasies about women, but I have never fantasized about choking a woman
No,
while
I
I'm
don't understand that at
engaged in
all.
sex. Now,
Yeah,
it clearly is a big thing. It must come from these various porn sites. So here's a question
yeah.
for you, Pat. Do you think porn online should be outlawed?
Aye, I do. Dude, I
Why?
wouldn't have said that years ago, but I do now.
Why?
Dude, I've read so much in recent times now, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I've read enough. The number of young fellas who have killed people because of something they've seen on porn, the what do you call it, the way they treat women because there's something they've seen on a porn site, etc., etc. And Jude, there's no doubt about it. I think we've become desensitized to so much. Like, Jude, a couple of years ago, killing children and a war situation was considered, it would have brought down the heavens. And America killed 140 or 165 kids last Saturday in a
Mm,
school, and they just brazened it out.
mm,
Israel has done that in Gaza, brazened it
mm.
out. And there's not even big sort of media shitstorm about
Yeah.
murdering mass murder of children.
But
And
let's
I put the if you watch the old games that kids were playing a couple of years ago, there was
yeah.
beheadings and all this sort of stuff. I
Mm.
think we've become desensitized to
But
violence.
let's stick with the porn thing for the moment because most people would say that porn should be allowed for those, and it is allowed. It's perfectly legal to have porn sites for adults.
Yeah,
I would agree with you, Pat. I actually think it should be banned. And there, I give you the reason. It is that we make much of the equality of men and women. And we've agreed that this thing about choking a woman, how in God's name could a woman enjoy being choked or half strangled um, in the course of sex? Leave
yeah,
aside that, when on the porn sites, as you say, you're seeing the man as being dominant and the
yeah,
woman submissive. I think that's disgusting. That's appealing to the lowest common denominator, almost
yeah,
bestial. I really do
yeah.
think so. So why is it that nobody stands up? I bet you there'll be people who say, "Oh, would you listen to those two old fuddy duddies? Imagine they want to make the Ireland pure again. Chase
Yeah,
colleagues at the crossroads."
there's such a thing as consenting adults, but what was her name? The girl, Jesus, she used to be on Sky. She's Irish. She's from Galway. She was, know that Grok. I think it's, she was
Yes, yes, yes.
what's her name? I
Yeah.
can't remember.
Elon Musk's
And
thing.
Elon Musk thing. Apparently, I'm not 100% certain of this, but she was on RT one night and she says she had personal experience. She says there's nothing about free speech and all the rest of it about and degrading people. Jude, I would consider a lot of porn these days. Jude, the old days of Playboy. Like that was not to me. That was just soft porn, and I had no big objection to that. But Jude, there's something toxic about when you're harming somebody that they end up in hospital. And what could possibly be sexy or funny or loving or kind about choking somebody? Good
Mhm.
merciful Jesus, Jude. If that's what porn is, it's not for me.
I tend to agree because uh, I think porn by definition is aimed at a male audience. You don't hear of,
Uh,
porn site for women. And the idea, as I understand, I'll tell you the truth, I've never watched a porn thing online, so I probably shouldn't be talking about it any more than I was talking about the
uh,
Sdlp's paper. But at the same time, I think I've been fairly safe ground in saying that the porn sites show male dominance.
yeah,
But surely
a
to
lot of them
God,
do
in
anyway. Yeah,
society,
yeah,
we strive for the very opposite. We want people
yeah,
to be equal and respected equally. I'm
yeah,
surprised that women who are strong on equality between the sexes aren't up in arms against porn sites. I mean,
yeah.
why would they indulge in that? It just, as I say to me, as I say, it strikes me as appealing to the lowest sort of
Yeah,
animalistic
base
tendencies.
instincts. Yeah,
Yeah,
base instincts,
yeah,
Jude.
yeah.
Yeah, and and it's toxic, Jude. It's basically showing men in control. By the way, it's a growing thing. I can't remember the name. Jesus, Jude, I'm on a bad run here, but there's a couple of British guys. They're two brothers, and they're this sort of toxic masculinity that men have been demasculated, and they
Oh,
said women are only good for one thing, and that's
oh.
having sex. And basically, I think one of them is he's in jail somewhere about Romania. The Tate brothers. That's it,
Aye, the
Tate,
Tit Brothers,
Andrew
yeah.
Tate. Yeah, yeah. And they know. I watched the program about them one night, and Jude, they have massive number of followers of young males, and I find that frightening, Jude, because I think if you can treat anybody, male, female, man, woman, child, adult, badly, we're going down a rabbit hole here of sort of everything's acceptable, and nobody pays a price for it doing wrong.
Well, the thing you see, Pat, that the tits would argue is that men feel displaced and emasculated now. That because women are equal to men, that they feel they've lost their place. They feel what can they do? Their role in society is sort of been degraded. Do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds to me like unionism with equality of nationalism.
Yeah,
Because one side is being given equality with you, you say, "Oh, you
we have
son,
lost everything.
I've lost my identity." We're saying the
Yeah,
same thing about men. I think that's total bollocks. I really do.
yeah,
And I'm speaking
yeah.
as someone who got it off of bloody hiding on Twitter because I talked about Naomi Long on one occasion, and I only briefly mentioned it, as you well know. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we're
But
agreed.
the other thing is, you see, tomorrow morning, there's a lot of guys who've got a problem with misogyny. I am saying, as a man, men get a far better, easier life than women, and I am as
Oh yeah,
certain
of
of it.
course, of course, of
Yeah.
course. I couldn't agree with you more. And in
Would you
fact,
carry a child for 9 months, and go through childbirth?
it
Not a
doesn't stop. It
hope in
doesn't
hell.
stop there, Pat. The fact of the matter is
No,
that
but I'm just
women
making
do
that point.
far more child rearing than men do. And
Aye, yeah,
I put my hand up and say I'm guilty as hell.
uh,
Even though I love my children and I would like to think I've done something. I don't know if that's the case now, mind you. I mean, if I look at my sons, and I guess you'd probably find the same thing with your sons, that they spend a lot more time with their children and helping their children and encouraging their children and relating to their children, certainly than my father did with me or I did with
absolutely,
my
absolutely.
children.
No, the old British system, the children were brought in to see their father for half an hour and then sent to bed. But that's
Yeah,
no, you're dead right.
raised by
It's a
nanny.
different system. It's raised
Yeah,
by a nanny. And
yeah.
what was it? They were sent off to boarding school when you were 9 or something.
Oh, yes.
Jesus Christ
And don't
Almighty!
forget, Pat, you're looking at somebody who was sent off when they were 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Why
You
do
were sent off to
you
St.
thought
Dobbs.
you thought this warped nature came naturally to me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's go to another one. I see, and I think again this is the Irish Times. They're saying that employees now have the right to ask for work from home, uh, and they're allowed to ask for non-retirement at 65. Would you feel that's a good breakthrough that our employees have a right to ask their employer for work to be allowed to work from home?
Good. It's amazing. I didn't know you were going to ask that one, but I was out. I was out there, and I was only in the door about 10 minutes before we started, and I was listening to a thing on the radio. It was a woman. It was on RT. She worked. She was from County Kildare, and she was working in Crumlin. It's amazing that you asked this question because I'm up to speed on it. She said she was getting up at 5:30 in the morning to head to Crumlin in Dublin. It was taking her the best part of 2 hours. 2 hours to get there. She finished at 4 o'clock in the evening, and she was going down either I think it's the M50 or someone the A7 or something. I can't remember. But it was definitely I think there's a combination of those two roads.
Hmm.
And she said if there was a car crash, she was certain it would be 3 hours before she get home. I think it was. She said roughly it was an hour and 45 minutes in the morning, but it could be 3 hours on the way home in the evening. No, and the presenter asked her, "Well, tell me what it." She said, "I would easily, on occasion, spend 5 hours in my car on a day." And this was a woman. Imagine Jude, every morning getting up at 5:30 and going. Anyway, she made the decision. She said, "I can't." She gave up her job, and I don't know exactly what the ending is because I was had to go, but I didn't quite catch the end of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's horrendous. But do you think this is a step forward then, where employees
Right,
will
but you
now
know, here's
have
the
the
point.
right to ask for work from home?
Jude, why should I spend? Like I was a journalist. I could easily with the new technology. All I needed was an editor saying, "Pat, I need a report on such and such and such. Would you do an article on Jude Collins? Would you do whatever, whatever? Or you go to court if you're a young junior reporter, whatever." I could easily do at home what I could do in the office. Why should I, particularly say in big cities like Belfast, Cork, Dublin, Galway, Limerick? Why should I spend 2 hours going
Hmm.
in the morning up to there when I could easily
Uh,
do the same amount of work
so,
at home.
so
By the way, I'm involved sometimes in the Irish News, and I think a lot of their staff now work from home.
well then, do you see this statement or edict, I guess, employees have a right to ask for work from home? Is that a breakthrough then?
Yeah, I'm all in favour of that shit.
Well, I tell you, Pat, I'm not. I'm not.
Oh
I
yeah,
totally object to it. I'll tell you why. Because they say employees have the right to ask for work from home. When I was retiring at
yeah,
65, they had just brought in an Age Equality Act in Westminster, and it had
yeah.
exactly the same sort of wording. You had the right to ask your superiors to be kept on for a number of years. And I
But they have the
thought
right
that
to
I
refuse.
thought that was one of the stupidest things I'd ever heard in my life. If I
Yeah.
had the right to ask them, they had the right to say no. And if
I know
you've
you.
got the right,
I know you caught me there. You were playing a technical game there.
no, it's not
Like
technical. It's not technical. It's just black and
you know
white.
the
The
right
right to ask. Are they
and the right
kidding?
to ask, and they have the right to refuse. But
Yeah,
apparently,
it's
you have the right
pointless.
now, unless they can come up with compelling reasons. I think they're trying to fix up the legislation. If you can give, if they refuse, as far as I know, they're trying to set up some sort of a sort of ACAS panel where you can go along, you can appeal it, and you can go along. And unless they can come up with a very good reason why you should come into your work, you know, Jude, here's the point. There was old man McCarroll who owned the Derry Journal, and I had a very strange way of working on occasions. And one day I said to Mr. McCarroll, I'm sorry, about the fact that I do that. He says, but I couldn't give a monkey's what you. He says, it's what you produce on no Dairy Journal
Hmm.
the next morning. That's all that matters to me. And
Hmm.
should it matter to you if your son, whatever he works at, you have his daughter, doctor, if she treats 30 patients a day, or wherever it happens to be, doesn't matter what she does in her own house. Well, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter the surgery over there or on what do
Hmm.
you call it on a computer to explain your symptoms. Oh, I can explain to you what's wrong. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
No, I totally agree with you, Pat. I think that's a wonderful breakthrough where people can work from home and can work. In fact, when I wanted to really do a day's work, if at all possible, I used to stay at home from the university because I was
Yeah,
able to work undistracted. Nobody coming
yeah,
saying, "You're going for a cup of coffee now."
yeah,
No, just focus. But my point is
yeah,
this: I hate this expression that they have the right to ask,
yeah.
because if you have the right to ask, then it seems to me, except as explicitly stated, your employer has a right to say no.
Right to say no.
And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you're
I
going to
agree.
say, well, then we'll
Yeah,
have to have a hearing and we'll have to have, a whole
yeah.
sort of series of cabinet
But
meetings or whatever.
I think now it has to be that, like for instance, in the Republic of Ireland, imagine how much time you're spending going to work. Imagine how much you're spending on fuel. Imagine on the environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And unless there's some really uh, right reason that you need to be at a workplace, I don't see how any employer could sustain an argument. Oh no, no, you're there, remote working is ruled out.
Well, I could see how an employer might say, I want my employees to be together because it does produce a certain creativity and buzz and so
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
But I think the ideal would be to have some sort of hybrid, because the fact of
yeah,
the matter is, certainly in my experience, an awful lot of time at work gets wasted because it's good
yeah,
fun talking to people. It's fun.
ah,
It's
yeah.
enjoyable to be there with your mates.
Mm.
But at the same time, if you're at home alone and you can work, then you should be doing it. So I think a
Some of
mixture of
them,
the two.
aye, but I would nearly argue the other way for another reason. That they should go. People can get very isolated at home,
Yes, that's right.
and I know from there's one of my kids now, Shane, the eldest guy, is a school teacher, but Paddy's younger. I've seen Paddy because he's working from home remotely. He should finish at 5:30 or 5 o'clock. I've gone on and he's been working at 7 o'clock, which is a very bad thing.
I agree. I agree. You need to be self-disciplined and
Yeah,
just have your hours and work those
yeah,
hours and not have anything
yeah,
interfering. But you have a good degree of flexibility. Plus, you don't waste time commuting. You know, some of those,
yeah,
the case you cited is a perfect example. Okay, we've about 5 minutes left. There's a study is reported again in the Irish Times, which is saying we should be getting money. Pat mentioned the Irish Times every
the Irish
second
Times all the
bloody
time.
minute. And
And
the
she's
Irish,
mentioning them all
you
the time,
mentioned
by
the
the
Irish
way.
News as well. We should be getting money for that.
Yeah.
Okay, there is this article in the Irish Times, and they say middle class teachers are able to empathize better with middle class kids than kids that are working class or whatever.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that?
it's probably true. Jude, I've heard it a million times. In fact, I heard it quite recently. I was involved in a wee project in the Bogside, and there was a woman said to me, and I think I wrote it down. And she said she went to a certain school in Derry, and she says we were from. She says the lower bog. There must be even a sort of a hierarchy in the bog as well. But she says we went to school. But she says, see if it was a teacher's child or a solicitor's child or a doctor's child or whatever, whatever. She says they were treated much better than we were. We were from the unemployed part of the bog and so on. Now this woman is very, very bright because you talk to her for 10 minutes and you know she's very bright. And she said she hated that. She says she was sort of treated like second class. So Jude, to answer your question, yeah, I would say that's probably quite true. And by the
Yeah.
way, I'm surrounded by teachers and within my own family and all the rest of
Well, I feel fairly strongly on that, and I'm sure that's the case. That middle class teachers empathize and get along better with middle class kids. But
it.
the
Yeah,
same study found that young teachers from 1920 to 29 or 30, they
yeah,
tended to be better at working with kids they were middle class themselves, but they were better at working with working class kids. I'll tell you
yeah,
something now, Pat. I've taught for about 10 years in high school, and I've taught in university as well. But I have always enjoyed working with working class kids more than I have with middle class kids. The
yeah,
tendency is for middle class kids to have parents who are pushing them, and all they
yeah,
want is get me a good grade so I can get into university and do medicine or do whatever.
yeah,
Uh,
whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Working class kids tend to throw themselves into whatever it is you're doing in the subject. And some of the working class kids have a spark and a fire and I don't know what it is. It's a fluency.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
just, the middle class kids are anemic when you put them
yeah,
alongside them. And
yeah,
I think I used to say that there was they should put at the front of many of the schools the big word waste. So many
yeah,
kids' lives are wasted who have got all sorts of potential. I mean, I remember a kid, for example, who could tell, he could stand up and he'd tell stories about something and something that happened to him. And he
yeah,
had the class in stitches. In stitches. He was
yeah,
a brilliant orator, a brilliant talker. But did that
yeah.
help him when he went in for his exams? Not at all.
Not
Not
at
at
all.
all.
No.
He was finished.
Yeah,
So the middle class
yeah,
thing is, I can well believe it. And it's time they really got past that. There must be a way of tapping in, maybe more oral work for
yeah,
exams, ways of getting into those talents that those working class kids have, which are something else.
yeah.
Okay, just 2 minutes now, Pat. Anything else grab your attention? I have a lot of stuff.
No, Jude, I hate bringing him up, but Trump, because I think that's
Oh,
really what he wants all the attention. But I loved the one last night. He wants the right to determine who should be the next leader of Iran.
this is outrageous.
It's got become circus like in its insanity. What does they say? If you elect a clown, expect a circus. Well, that's what America has got. Dude, it's been insane. And under God's right, has anybody in America the right to choose the leader for the Iranian people?
Pat, I think it's far more serious than say that there are
Yeah, yeah,
clowns in a circus. This is vicious. This is awful. The fact of the
yeah,
matter is, Netanyahu is a war criminal. Trump
yeah,
is a war criminal. Neither of the two will ever be arrested or put on trial for the terrible, terrible, terrible things that
right,
they've done and are
no,
continuing
yeah,
to do. And
yeah,
I mean, Trump says, oh no, we're not finished yet. We're gonna, no
yeah,
unconditional surrender, and I'm going to
yeah,
decide how the place is run after that. This is
Yeah.
outrageous.
Ah,
They say things
absolutely.
like, oh, we must have an international order, not allow Putin and people like that to push us around. I swear to God, the one thing that disappoints me is we had Mark Carney make that wonderful speech.
And Davos.
And look, it's just a speech. Why haven't we
Yeah.
got all the middle ranking nations
But
come together?
I'm not 100% certain. Carney has been to India and he's been to Australia. And as far as I know now, I'm open to correction again on this, they've signed deals. And Jude, I would presume they're like a swan on the surface. They're doing a lot, but underneath they're doing a whole lot of stuff. I think there are a lot of people are trying to sign deals away from the Americans.
Let's hope so.
I
Let's
hope
hope
they
so,
are.
Pat. We're out of time now, but let's hope so. Okay, all the best, Pat. Enjoy your
Have a good
weekend.
weekend, Jude.
Okay, bye,
Thank
bye,
you.
bye,
All the best, Jude. Bye, Jude.
bye.